Shalom, family. Good to see you all here. I hope you're doing well. I have an announcement I have to make. I have set up Give, Send, Go. I have to have surgery on my right arm. I know I have been telling y'all I have nerve damage, and they think it would be best if I get the damaged part taken out of my arm. So it will be in February. I will definitely keep you posted. And I also told you my husband is unemployed now. He worked until the very end of November. So, of course, the timing of this is just absolutely horrible, but it's something that I have to get done. I've been wearing one of those constricting sleeves every day, and it does cut down on a lot of the pain, but it's still there, and it is just making day-to-day life more difficult. So I just need to do something about it. So that's what I'm doing. Believe me, anything you can give is deeply appreciated. Your prayers, your thoughts, your prayers are also deeply appreciated as well. So I'm going to post the link, and it's also in my community tab. So there it is. So everybody, thank you. Just keep me in prayer because I'm sure going to need it going through surgery. This is the last thing I really want, but it's becoming necessary because just the daily pain. Yeah, I just want to get back to normal. And if this is the road back to normal, then it's a road I will take. So, y'all, we're going to talk about Stephen Miller. He went on CNN and did what he always does, make a spectacle of himself. And we're going to watch that interview. In fact, we're going to watch the whole interview. And this dude is so unfit to run anything. Donald Trump just needs someone in his cabinet just as nutty as he is. This man, he shouldn't be in charge of nothing. Seriously. He shouldn't be in charge of anything. He's under this belief that Donald Trump is entitled to run anything he wants. If he wants to run the entire Western Hemisphere, then that's the way it is. No, no, white man, that is not the way it is. And this is a big reason why your rulership must come to an end. You are very destructive, and the longer you're in power, the more you're going to bring this earth down. So there's a reason why it was a limitation on how long you can rule. And I'm with the Most High on that limitation because y'all don't know when to stop. Here we are, hundreds of years later, and you're still trying to steal people's land, steal all of the resources, leave the people with nothing. You've done that all over the world. And it's gotten to the point where it's overkill now. And I don't know about you. Who the hell? Donald Trump can't even run this country. Look at the shape America is in. The unemployment is high. People are struggling. They can't afford so many things, the food, the gas, people are falling behind on student loans. They said the default is at record levels of people defaulting. People are also defaulting on credit card payments. And, and they're struggling to pay these astronomical car payments. And people just can't do it. And now that we're in 2026, they're talking about doubling what people pay for insurance premium. It is outrageous trying to survive in this day and age. It's crazy. And Donald Trump is sitting there still trying to blame Joe Biden for the whole thing. You know, no, Donald Trump, this is you. You are now the sitting president. So whatever happens, you better roll with the punches because it falls on you now. It don't fall on anyone else, just you. So with Stephen Miller, this man is bad. He is nuttier than a fruitcake. I don't see how anybody can suggest he be in charge of anything. So let me go ahead and share my screen so you can see this spectacle for yourself. Please give me a 1 if you can see my screen. Please give me a 1 if you can see my screen. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. All right.
With the world lead and asking questions about what happened in Venezuela over the weekend and what happens now. White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller, joins us now. Stephen, thanks so much for joining us. So a source briefed on the Venezuelan operation told me that a handful of American troops sustained bullet and shrapnel wounds, but none are life-threatening. Can you share with us how serious any injuries to American service members might be, and also any information you can tell us about any Venezuelan civilian casualties?
Yes. Well, let me take the second part first, which is that the overwhelming share of casualties and fatalities that were inflicted were against the Cuban guard that had exerted control over the people of Venezuela. So many don't realize that for years, Maduro stayed in power through an illicit deal with Cuban communists to provide his security because he didn't trust his own people to keep him safe. That is how much he was hated inside of Venezuela. So what our special forces encountered when they did that daring midnight assault into Caracas were armed Cuban guards, and they sustained massive numbers of casualties. I can't give you an exact number. The numbers that you've seen in terms of the Cuban guards publicly reported are probably lower than the actual number that were killed. To your first question, no, none of the, at least as I've been briefed, none of the injuries are life-threatening. Everybody is stable. And it just underscores the remarkable skill, precision, courage, and capability of our special forces. And I wanted to set the table one more time for your audience. I'm sure you've talked about it at length already, but the United States of America launched an assault force into Venezuelan territory, which has sophisticated air defense systems, which has sophisticated surveillance systems, which has weaponry that they've received that can take out planes and helicopters from our foreign adversaries. They've been stockpiling for years in anticipation of the possibility of such an action. Maduro was staying in a military fortress. In other words, since the United States had started amassing this armada under President Trump's leadership and direction, he'd increasingly narrowed the scope of his own movement. He was sleeping in a fortress. And so we flew into Caracas. These special forces engage in direct gunfire with elite Cuban guards, and every single kill was an enemy kill.
So there were no civilian casualties?
Well, I didn't see any reports of any civilian casualties. But my point is that in this raging gunfire battle that took place, the point that I'm making to you is no Americans were killed. Because of the planning, skill, and preparation, the enemy sustained massive losses. Not one of our assets was lost, not one of our people was lost.
So let's talk about what next. Delcy Rodriguez was formally sworn as Venezuela's acting president this afternoon. She was the vice president. She described the U.S. intervention as, quote, without a doubt, Zionist in character, unquote. Is acting President Rodriguez someone that the U.S. can work with?
So the acting president put out a statement. I want to say, Jake, it was last night, pledging cooperation with the United States, pledging full and complete cooperation.
But they also just passed a law saying that if you supported the operation, outlawing individuals or threatening with criminal penalties, individuals, if they supported the operation against Maduro, I think they did that today.
Well, the good news there, Jake, is that nobody inside of Venezuela supported the operation, so it's a law without meaning or effect. Look, Jake, there's going to be some posturing that occurs when a nation has been so thoroughly defeated in this way. The United States of America, think about this, Jake. The United States of America has encircled this nation for months. One of the largest naval armadas in history has been stationed off its coast. Fighter jets have been encircling the island. We've been engaging in kinetic lethal strikes against Maduro's drug boats and trained Arauco gang members leaving the island.
Yeah.
We have launched a complete oil embargo of the ghost fleet, the dark ships. And now on top of that, and now on top of all that, right, Maduro is sitting in a jail cell in New York, as is his wife. So of course there's going to be, that's very important though, of course there's going to be some posturing.
Okay.
Without giving anything away, I want to be very clear. Very clear. The government has sent messages. This is such an important point, Jake. To the Secretary of State, to our senior U.S. government official negotiators. They have sent message after message making clear that they will meet the terms, demands, conditions, and requirements of the United States.
Okay.
And I want to be very clear about that.
So let's, the question about who is now running Venezuela is one that even members of Congress who are big Trump supporters say they're not quite sure about. Senate Majority Leader John Thune told CNN's Manu Raju that he doesn't know what President Trump meant by his assertion that the U.S. is running Venezuela, and he said he needs more information. Can you tell us what the president means when he says, is acting President Delcy Rodriguez in charge? Is she running Venezuela or not?
Well, what the president said is true. The United States of America is running Venezuela. By definition, that's true. Jake, we live in a we live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else. But we live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world.
But are you saying that
the beginning of time? But
in terms of day-to-day operations in Venezuela, that is acting President Rodriguez, right? It's not some sort of American emissary.
No, what I'm saying is, we'll keep going here, Jake. So I want to say what I'm saying, and then you'll follow up. But what I'm saying is just one level above that, which is that by definition, we are in charge because we have the United States military stationed outside the country. We set the terms and conditions. We have a complete embargo on all of their oil and their ability to do commerce. So for them to do commerce, they need our permission. For them to be able to run an economy, they need our permission. So the United States is in charge. The United States is running the country during this transition period.
If that's true,
obviously that doesn't mean that President Trump is setting the bus fare schedule inside the country. So doesn't mean that President Trump is assigning the curriculum in the country.
The indictment that the president and the military were acting on from 2020 was of 6 people. 2 of them were seized on Saturday by our special operators. There are 4 other individuals indicted who remain in Venezuela. Is the U.S. demanding that they be turned over? One of them is Maduro's son. One of them is a former government official. One is a current government official. And one of them is the head of Tren de Aragua, as I'm sure you know. Are they going to be turned over if President Trump is, in fact, running Venezuela in the way you described?
Well, I don't want to. Obviously, what we have to balance here, Jake, which I think you more than most understand, we have to balance between, of course, what I can say to you publicly versus very close-hold conversations that might be happening privately. And I know you understand and respect that. But I'll answer the question in this way. There might be individuals who are fugitives from American justice that could become part of a future conversation. But it's also true that for government leaders inside of Venezuela, as the president has said, right, we want an interim government that will respect the interests of the people of Venezuela, that wants a good, peaceful, secure future for Venezuela. So I would say it this way. For those who may be indicted, the best choice they can possibly make is to be part of a constructive decision-making process for the future of Venezuela. The best decision they can make is to cooperate fully and completely with the United States to be part of building this brighter future for Venezuela during this interim period.
On another important topic. That's not what I think, but you invaded the country. We went into the country and we seized the leader of Venezuela.
Top aide to President Trump asserted on Monday that Greenland rightfully belonged to the United States and that the Trump administration could seize the semi-autonomous Danish territory if it wanted. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland, Mr. Miller told Jake Tapper, the CNN host, after being asked repeatedly whether he would rule out using military force. The remarks were part of a vocal push by Mr. Miller, long a powerful behind-the-scenes player in Trump administration policy, to justify American imperialism and a vision for a new world order in which the United States could freely overthrow national governments and take foreign territory and resources, so long as it was in the national interest. We live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power, he said. These are the iron laws of the world since the beginning of time. Mr. Miller made his comments after his wife posted an image on social media over the weekend, suggesting that the United States would soon take control of Greenland. And as Mr. Trump has renewed his own push for the island, Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen of Denmark urged Mr. Trump on Sunday to stop the threats to annex Greenland, in effect attacking a NATO ally. The United States taking Greenland by force would rip apart the central agreement that underpins the NATO military alliance, of which Denmark and the United States are both founding members. Under that treaty, an attack on any member is treated as an attack on all members. Mr. Trump has previously said he would not rule out using the military to take Greenland. Mr. Miller also echoed Mr. Trump's intent to rule Venezuela and exploit its vast oil reserves after a U.S. raid seized President Nicolas Maduro and his wife from Caracas. Even some of America's staunchest allies have criticized the raid, and the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, said the raid had violated the UN Charter. The United States of America is running Venezuela, Mr. Miller said, dismissing international treaties enshrining a nation's right to independence and sovereignty as international niceties. What exactly is meant by running Venezuela is a matter of some dispute. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has shied away from the descriptor, even as Trump insists that the United States is very much in charge of Venezuela, and Speaker Mike Johnson, who has vigorously defended the military operation, has maintained that the United States is not engaged in military hostilities or an occupation. Mr. Miller's language echoed a dark history of the United States governing weaker, smaller states in Latin America by flexing its military might. Mr. Miller asserted that a U.S. military blockade of the South American country of 28 million people would give the United States control of Venezuela. We set the terms and conditions, Mr. Miller said. We have a complete embargo on all of their oil and their ability to do commerce. So for them to do commerce, they need our permission. For them to be able to run an economy, they need our permission. So the United States is in charge. The United States is running the country. Senator Bernie Sanders, independent of Vermont, denounced Mr. Miller's remarks soon after, saying on CNN that Mr. Miller gave a very good definition of imperialism. Trump has made it clear he wants to take Venezuela's oil, he added. Last I heard, this is what imperialism is all about. And I suspect that people all over the world are saying, wow, we're going back to where we were 100 years ago or 50 years ago, where the big powerful countries were exploiting poorer countries for their natural resources.
Greenland should be part of the United States. What right does Denmark assert control over Greenland? What is the basis of their territorial claim? Obviously, Greenland should be part of the United States. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
Election.
Exactly.
I asked you if there would be an election in Venezuela. That's what I asked. I said, why was the president so quick to dismiss Machado? You answered that question. And then I said,
the objective, Jake, is security and stability for the people of Venezuela.
This man is insane. Donald Trump's deputy chief of staff, Stephen Miller, cannot go on TV without throwing a tantrum and crashing out. I want to show you this CNN interview with Jake Tapper and Stephen Miller, which very quickly derails after Tapper asks the simple question, who is currently running Venezuela? This should not be a gotcha question. It is not a trick question, but Stephen Miller begins to immediately get mad. Later on in the interview, Stephen Miller completely loses his mind, and this turns into a shouting match. Just for some context, Stephen Miller is rumored to be playing a big part in this quote-unquote transition, if you want to call it, but really, it's not a regime change. The same regime has stayed in power. We are now just coercing this regime to give us oil. The Washington Post reported earlier today, the National Security Council staff has been gutted and the administration has yet to nominate an assistant secretary of state to handle the Western Hemisphere. The White House is weighing giving Stephen Miller, Trump's deputy chief of staff and Homeland Security advisor, a more elevated role in overseeing post-Maduro operations in Venezuela. Miller has been the architect of a lot of the administration's most radical immigration policy, radical deportation policy. And with that background, I want to show you this clip of Stephen Miller just melting down. I'll interject in between the clips, but I'm going to let this play out before giving my opinion. Make sure you drop a like. Make sure you subscribe to the Adam Mockler feed below and check this out.
The question about who is now running Venezuela is one that even members of Congress who are big Trump supporters say they're not quite sure about. Senate Majority Leader John Thune told CNN's Manu Raju that he doesn't know what President Trump meant by his assertion that the U.S. is running Venezuela, and he said he needs more information. Can you tell us what the president means when he says, is acting President Delcy Rodriguez in charge? Is she running Venezuela or not?
Well, what the president said is true. The United States of America is running Venezuela. By definition, that's true. Jake, we live in a world in which you can talk all you want about international niceties and everything else. But we live in a world, in the real world, Jake, that is governed by strength, that is governed by force, that is governed by power. These are the iron laws of the world that have existed since the beginning of time.
But in terms of day-to-day operations in Venezuela, that is acting President Rodriguez, right? It's not some sort of American emissary.
What I'm saying is, we'll keep going here, Jake. So I want to say what I'm saying, and you'll follow up. But what I'm saying is just one level above that, which is that by definition, we are in charge because we have the United States military stationed outside the country. We set the terms and conditions. We have a complete embargo on all of their oil and their ability to do commerce. So for them to do commerce, they need our permission. For them to be able to run an economy, they need our permission.
Okay, a few things. Number one, this is like some serial killer shit right here. Some actual psychopathic serial killer stuff. Stephen Miller is ranting on the White House front lawn about how we're not in an age of niceties anymore. Let me quote him. He said, "These have been the rules since the beginning of time." He's talking about countries invading weaker countries and, running those countries. This is no longer the beginning of time, Stephen Miller. This is 2026 at this point. In a post-World War II world order, world leaders came together to make sure that these countries never devolved into such global conflict ever again. We've created some broad rules about invading your next door neighbor, about grabbing territory, and about stealing land. Now, people have broken these rules, such as Vladimir Putin, and there have been wars like Vietnam and in the Middle East, but
sent our soldiers to die in deserts in the Middle East to try to build them parliament, and we're not going to let a country fall into the hands of our adversaries.
Okay, so you heard this madness, right? you heard this madness, right? So this is how the CNN interview went, and let me tell you something. This is just more proof. Stephen Miller shouldn't be in charge of a dog pound. This man is not fit to run anything. I wouldn't trust him to run. I seriously wouldn't even trust him to run a small department. I wouldn't. I don't think he's suited for that. So these are the people Donald Trump picks. And it's true. He got a cabinet full of mediocre men and women that are drunk on power. That's all they are. And let me tell you something. If you think he's unhinged now, he's going to be even worse, especially if they go after Greenland. Now, I got the next live coming up at 3:45 where Donald Trump is talking about going after Greenland in the next 20 days. Now, Greenland is also part of NATO. So then what's the purpose in having NATO if Donald Trump going to be doing all these land grabs? Then doesn't it kind of defeat the purpose to even have NATO? So they had an emergency meeting and Donald Trump was very upset. He went out on Truth Social and was pumping out all of these complaints and rants from there because the UN had an emergency meeting on Monday talking about what Donald Trump did. and he had a meltdown over it. He had a meltdown that they came together and had an emergency meeting. Well, yeah, Donald Trump, they're going to have an emergency meeting because they know you're not going to just stop with Venezuela. You're going to be grabbing up everybody's land. And then I was reading Donald Trump think he should run the entire Western Hemisphere. I mean, look how crazy these folks are. If Donald Trump is so good at running things, how come he couldn't get himself out of 34 convictions? This man is always talking about somebody being a criminal, and he's the biggest criminal of them all. It's just unbelievable. So we shall see what happens. But, there's a lot of chatter over these last few days about Greenland. And Greenland has also come forward saying they don't want to be part of the US. They've already said it multiple times. They don't want to be part of the US. Canada has said they don't want to be part of the US. But he got his sights on several different countries. And I was also reading this morning, he wants all of the Caribbean. So Donald Trump done lost his dementia mind for real. He has lost his mind. But yeah, these are your typical men that think they're way smarter than what they actually are, and they just want to run the world forever. It would be no world left if we had these people in charge even for another 100 years. It would be nothing left, And I was listening to this, probably was a couple of years ago, this white man, because they were talking about their declining birth rates. And he said he really wasn't worried about it because white people got another 1,000 years to run things. Says who? Says who said you got another 1,000 years? I said, y'all some delusional ass people. Another 1,000 years, y'all probably won't even be here. You're barely here now. Hell, you may not even be here in another 100 years the way things are going. But he's talking about they got another 1,000 years. I said, maybe he's talking about their slavery. Because he can't be talking about ruling the world for another 1,000 years. It would be nothing left. We wouldn't be left. The animals wouldn't be left. It would literally be an earth with nothing but bugs. It would be nothing but that. But it is a trip, y'all. So again, if you were not here when I made my announcement in the beginning, I have to get some surgery done on my right arm. I have nerve damage. And they think the best thing for me to do is to have surgery and have the damage removed. The healing is just not going as quickly as it should. And I have now been in pain for the last few months. So I have Give, Send, Go. If you can donate, I would deeply appreciate it. I'll take your prayers, I'll take your donations, and will deeply appreciate either one I get from you. So, y'all, thank you so much for being here. And also, the information is in my community tab for those, after the live stream is over and you need to find the link to my Give, Send, Go. It is in the community tab. So, ladies and gentlemen, I have my next live at 3:45. I will see you then. Shalom, family.